we're about to have our keynote speaker give his presentation. I'm really excited about it this year. It's going to be it's a pretty cool story, and kind of what we wish all of these stories end up being. So when I came to Ag Ventures Alliance back in 2016, one of the very first companies I had a chance to hear pitch and actually end up investing in was called Smart Ag. They were building an autonomy system for grain carts at the time, and this startup was built by Colin Hurd. He's our guest speaker today, and it's been a pretty wild ride, I think, for him, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about that ride along the way. So Colin has devoted his career to leading innovative companies in the ag industry. In 2016, he founded his second company, which was Smart Ag, which developed the first retrofit driverless system to automate tractors. After funding and growing the company, he led Smart Ag successfully through an exit to Raven Industries in 2019. Raven was then acquired by Case in 2021. Colin stayed with Raven and managed business development until 2022. And he's going to share his story with us now. Colin, you want to come up?
How do I run the slides? All right. Well, it's good to be here. I have, as Spencer mentioned, kind of a long history with Ag Ventures Alliance, and trying to think back. You were in the Music City Hall last time I was at the annual meeting, but several years ago, and a lot's kind of changed since then, and a lot's still the same. What's really cool to see that's the same is this group here still supporting entrepreneurship in the Midwest and in agriculture. So it's great to be here today. Spencer asked that I talk a little bit about my story, and also a little bit about reinvesting back into the community, and back into ag entrepreneurship. So I'm going to talk through and hopefully convince you today, if you're not already convinced, why entrepreneurs are required to feed the world. And along this topic, I'll share my background, so you understand kind of my perspective and where I'm coming from, and then share some general thoughts I have about the space and why entrepreneurship is so important, especially in agriculture, and why you should keep investing in it. So first of all, I thought it would be helpful to understand the definition of an entrepreneur. So if you look it up in the dictionary, here's what it's going to tell you, or at least the one I looked up. Says a person who organizes and operates a business or businesses and takes on greater than normal financial risks in order to do so. To me, this doesn't fit. This is I don't know. It just doesn't seem right, right? To me, entrepreneurship is a lot more than this. And frankly, you don't necessarily have to take on more risks to be an entrepreneur and to be more successful. So here's my attempt at a better definition. And I'd like to know what you think on this. So to me, the first step of being an entrepreneur is having the ability to recognize a problem, and then start to look at that problem as an opportunity. And then here's the key step: is to solve that problem, and recognize that opportunity by building a business. And so to me, that's really what encompasses entrepreneurship: being able to find real problems that matter, and in our case, to agriculture, whether that's to farmers, livestock producers, you name it. Successful companies, in my experience, have always been founded off the basis of a problem identified as an opportunity. So I guess in my experience, at this point, people have started calling me a serial entrepreneur. I'm not sure that I know what the real definition of a serial entrepreneur is, but it probably just means you've done it a couple times. And I've learned a lot along the way. So I thought it would be helpful just to share my background in a little more depth, and talk through some of the experiences, some of the things I've picked up along the way. And then maybe it helps form the perspective I have on why entrepreneurs are required to feed the world. So I started out first with a company called Tractil. The problem there, and I guess in each of these cases, I try to really identify what is the problem that this business is trying to solve for. And so Tractil, we were solving for compaction, especially during planting. Smart Ag, our problem focus was on labor scarcity on the farm, and especially during harvest. Raven, there's a lot of different problems that we were solving there. A lot of what my attention went towards was chemical reduction. So using technologies to apply chemicals more accurately and not use as many. And then the new company that I'm involved with now, Mock, we're again kind of focused back on labor. So with Tractil, I pulled some pictures out of the archives for these products and these companies. So Tractil, this started in the early days, actually right after I graduated. Well, before I graduated, technically, Iowa State. So I was in a ag entrepreneurship class. A number of the entrepreneurs in the room and folks are probably familiar with Kevin Kimley's class, Econ 334. I think I was in one of the first second semester, maybe that class had been in existence. And so I took it and it really changed my trajectory career-wise in terms of what I was thinking I wanted to be when I grew up. So as a part of that class, there's a pitch competition at the end of it. And they asked us to come up with a business idea that we could pitch. And for me, I had spent the whole previous summer during an internship looking at stunted corn next to the pinch rows from planter compaction. And so to me, there was a problem, right? And then I was like, well, I have no idea how to solve this, but I bet I could do some easy math that would, let's say we save a couple bushels of yield. It's about a quarter of the rows are affected. So we can backtrack into, hey, what could we save somebody if we create a product? So ultimately, I went on and the judges voted that was the best idea in the class that semester. And then the Ag Entrepreneurship Initiative really kind of pushed me, Kevin Kimley and others, Dave Krogh as well, to keep pursuing this idea. And so we started doing some testing, ran over a bunch of corn, killed a lot of crop, but also saw some good impacts in the areas that we had actually broken up the ground behind the tire tracks. So ultimately went on to found a company called Agriculture Concepts and patented a product called Tractil to reduce wheel row compaction. At that point in my life, I was a broke college kid. And so this is maybe ties back into the risk side of this a little bit. So the way I looked at it from a risk standpoint was I could turn down a good job and just delay not making money for a period of time to see this through. And the worst case scenario is I was just going to end up broke again, right? So the risk was pretty minimal for me going from broke to broke. And, maybe that's just a perspective thing, but I think it's helpful context for a lot of people to look at is like, what's the worst case scenario that can happen? Are you okay with that? Sure. Let's do it then. And so we went on, built this product, started selling it all across the Midwest, and across the country, and then ultimately licensed it to Yetter Manufacturing. It wasn't a horribly lucrative endeavor. Didn't make a bunch of money, didn't have a big exit. But I think after that, it opened my eyes to a new problem, and it also gave me a lot of confidence to found another company. The way I looked at this first experience was about 4 years. So in my mind, I kind of looked at it as a 4-year degree in entrepreneurship. I didn't have a master's or anything like that, but it seemed like I could take a lot of the hard lessons that I learned doing track till and apply that to another business. And so almost immediately after getting out of track till, I founded a new company called Smart Ag. These two companies actually connected in an interesting way. So one of the things that bothered me, I guess, with our solution that we came up with called Tracto was that we were only putting a Band-Aid on the problem, right? So the compaction wasn't actually the result of compaction was labor scarcity is what it ultimately came down to, right? Guys didn't have enough people on their farms, so they really had to use large equipment to get everything done in time. Jason mentioned it in his pitch, but suitable planting days have decreased, and so equipment size has gotten longer or larger, and as a result of that, it's created this compaction issue. Now, the real solution is probably to use a lot smaller equipment and have lighter footprint, but a lot of farms were struggling to find any practical way to do that, and so kind of led me down this rabbit hole of looking at labor challenges on the farm, and ultimately then founding a company called Smart Ag. So I'm not an engineer. I don't have a tech background at all. I studied just business and ag in school. And so for me to start a tech company was a little bit of stretch of my capacity. And, I had to learn a lot. In the very early days, we were trying to reverse engineer a John Deere tractor's control system. And if you've ever opened up the armrest in an 8R tractor, there's hundreds and hundreds of wires in there, and they're all different colors, and each different color has some different signal on it. And I was colorblind, so still am. So it presented a lot of frustrating days. And eventually we did find the right guy and a co-founder of mine for this company. We got it done. We automated this tractor, basically had it driving around with an Xbox controller. We found a farmer that was willing to let us start testing on his farm, and essentially built the first proof of concept product during harvest in it would have been 2016. So that was kind of like the kickoff moment. I realized like, hey, this could actually be done. And if a farmer is willing to let us hack on his tractor all fall, and basically told us up front that he would buy it for $50K if we got it done. And I was like, well, seems like a good problem to solve. Somebody wants to buy it, and we can apparently make it work pretty well. And so that's how Smart Ag kind of got kicked off. And we spent the next 3 years really developing out grain cart automation for the farm. So by the end of that product development, we were able to put a combine driver in a unmanned grain cart in the same field. Combine driver through a tablet interface could basically push a button. The grain cart would look at what had been harvested and then find the best path to get to the combine. The guy would never have to stop the combine, so it would locate where the combine was in the field, navigate alongside of it, and then line itself up to unload on the go. When it had been filled, he could hit another button and it would go back to the edge of the field. The whole time being aware of what part of the field had been harvested and what other internal boundaries might exist, so it could navigate safely around all of that. And it ended up being a very impressive technology. I was really honored to be a part of it and help put the team together. But we were about to go to market with it, and then Raven was really interested in. I think another interesting aspect of this story is we were at the point where we had to raise very significant capital if we were going to bring this to market ourselves. So we were looking at doing a $10 million financing round to get it to market. I really struggled to find that investment, and I think the issue was that the capital that understood the problem very well just wasn't large enough to make that kind of deal, right? They couldn't really lead a $10 million round. Groups like Ag Ventures Alliance are great getting us off the ground, and they're a part of Smart Ag as well. But when we needed to go do a Series A financing, it was really hard to find that capital. And the people that did have the capacity to lead those types of rounds were based on the coast, and they frankly just didn't understand the problem we were trying to solve. Despite our best efforts to explain what a combine does, they still struggled. So, and so ultimately we were kind of faced with the decision of really scaling back our team or finding a good partner to exit to. And we had a lot of interest, and Raven ultimately came to the table and made a deal with us to buy the whole company. So that happened in November of 2019. The whole team, for the most part, went and joined Raven and started helping them really build out their autonomy portfolio. After that, and kind of alongside the acquisition of SmartAg, Raven bought another company called Dot, which was based out of Canada. This is the former Dot machine which is now I think Omni Power machine is what Raven calls it. What Raven didn't tell us when they bought us is that this machine didn't have very good working technology on it. So they really needed all of our technology to be put on this machine. And so it delayed our release of the grain cart product back a number of years. But ultimately provided a really unique platform for Raven to showcase their autonomy technology to the world. And it's a really innovative concept vehicle. But my focus at Raven kind of shifted to a new problem, which was focused on chemical reduction. And so we had the opportunity to go meet with a lot of different startups and early stage companies that were developing see and spray technology to help target, apply herbicides and even fertilizer in some cases at a variable rate. So it was a really unique experience for me to actually kind of be on the other side now, right? So I had always been the startup guy trying to do deals with strategics and selling to them. And now I was on the corporate side. All the startups were trying to do a deal with us and convince us why we should invest or be a part of their technology path. And so it gave me a really unique perspective. And it ultimately led to an announcement now that I think just came out last week, where Case IH acquired or Raven acquired, I don't know which brand they acquired it under, a company called Augmenta. So Augmenta was a startup based out of Greece, one of the first venture-backed companies out of Greece, which is crazy. But they have a camera system that will detect a lot of things within a crop and adjust the rate of fertilizer, and then ultimately can do some spraying behind it as well. So it's cool to actually see some of that effort that I put into it come to fruition just recently. And so most recently, in May, I left Raven to pursue a new opportunity. And I think for me, ultimately, there was still this really big need for more automation in agriculture. One of the things that bothered me, again, kind of, if you maybe are starting to see a little pattern here, right? So as I'm in one company, there's always still in the back of my mind unsolved problems that kind of fester. And so one of the issues that I always felt like, or one of the underserved elements of SmartAg, is we had manufacturers come to us all the time and say, look, we want to make this vehicle autonomous. Can your technology do it? Our answer was yes, but we can't do it now because we have to get this grain cart to market, right? This is the only thing we can focus on. And so at Raven, then I was like, hopefully now we'll be big enough where we can support all these companies. And, they were basically in the same shoes, right? This early technology, we've got to get this proven out before we can do anything else. And then when Case bought Raven, it became very apparent that Raven was not going to have any extra capacity to support outside OEMs. And so there's a company in California building this machine. It's called GUS, Global Unmanned Spray System. And they had sold over 200 vehicles that were completely autonomous. So they caught my eye. We met with them a number of times, and they're a very interesting group. Come to find out that they were using a technology company out of Maryland that did a bunch of DoD work for all their autonomy. What was really impressive to me was that these guys had reached more scale than Case IH, more scale than Deere, more scale, frankly, than anybody else in this space. And that level of experience, I knew how valuable it was. So I wanted to be a part of it. and they ultimately were looking for an exit. And so I was able to coordinate a deal with them and then another Iowa-based technology company to form Mock. So we're private equity backed, but we're essentially two companies, and we're focused on solving automation needs for OEMs in the space. Now, that's kind of my background, my experience. And I guess the one other thing that happened along the way, especially after the exit of Smart Ag, is I realized how important building out this ecosystem was. So when I started Tracktill, there was essentially no ecosystem within Ames or in the Midwest. I know Ag Ventures Alliance was probably early stages at that point, and I didn't even know about other investors at that stage. And so from the time I started Tracktill to 4 years later when I started Smart Ag, this ecosystem had kind of emerged, and it helped us do what we did at Smart Ag and scale that to a whole different level and have a successful exit. But I also then had the hindsight of knowing Raven took this technology that we had developed. They didn't mature it at all. They didn't improve it at all. They just got it in the hands of C&H, and C&H essentially paid 10 times more than what Raven paid for it. You know, two years later, if anything, Raven probably made the technology worse than it was when they got it from us. Hopefully nobody from Raven's here. But anyways, it gave me a perspective to know that if we were able to raise that capital and take Smart Ag to the next level, things probably would have been even more impactful for everybody involved and for our investors. And so I started investing in different technology companies. I joined a group called Ag Startup Engine out of Ames. There's a lot of our portfolio companies here. We do a lot of work with Ag Ventures Alliance and co-invest. And I just wanted to spend some time involved and also keep close to my startup roots while I was at Raven and invest capital back into the community, because I think it's so important to continue to support what's started in the Midwest here around ag tech and ag entrepreneurship. So back to the premise of this talk. Why do you need an entrepreneur to feed the world? So if I haven't convinced you yet, I haven't really put a lot of evidence out there, but I think my thought is like that this is how it's always been done, right? If you look back at some of the most impactful individuals and technologies and companies that, in my opinion, have shaped ag, it's always started with the entrepreneur. So Norman Borlaug, obviously, everybody in agriculture should know his name very well and should know exactly what he's done, but he quit his job at DuPont in 1944 to bring this technology to ag and make the impact that he had, right? So he took on that entrepreneur mindset and saw a problem, decided he was going to solve it, left his job. John Deere, right? Perfect example of a great entrepreneur, has had tremendous ongoing impact in ag. He's a welder, kind of a blacksmith, right? That was running his own business and started making plows, and kicked off what is now the world's largest ag equipment company. A modern day example is a guy named Greg Sauter. If you don't know who Greg Sauter is, you should. You've heard of his companies, Precision Planting, Yield 360. I would argue that Greg Sauter has had more impact on the planting technology in agriculture than any other individual out there, right? Any of the innovation that Deere has done was probably spurred by this gentleman, and he is one of the most humble people you'll meet. But he's got this entrepreneur mindset where he sees problems, he sees them in his operation, and he comes up with solutions. And some of those are very revolutionary and have pushed us forward a ton in agriculture. Another modern day example is Al Meyer, right? Ag Leader Technology. Al is essentially, I think of him as the grandfather of the yield monitor for combines. And so if you think about the impact that a yield monitor on a combine has had, it's tremendous. But again, he saw a problem, he recognized the opportunity, and took action to solve it, built the business to solve it. The other important aspect of entrepreneurship, and this is why you need entrepreneurs and not corporations to feed the world, right? The entrepreneur is always going to be faster than the company. That is our competitive advantage as an entrepreneur. We can do things in a year that would take many companies 5 years to do. I experienced that firsthand being at Raven and then being at CNH. You know, for us to make a decision just about the companies we want to evaluate took us 6 months. Just a decision about what we're going to evaluate. It's not a decision to definitely do anything other than look at something, right? Some companies are probably faster at it, but an entrepreneur is light years faster. And so here's some business math for you. If you're an engineer, I apologize, but tech plus a problem times a company is typically going to turn out new product features. But I think if you take tech plus a real problem times an entrepreneur, you're going to develop new markets and brand new products altogether. And that's what's so impactful, is that just like Greg Sauter kind of forced the hand of deer into higher precision planting, just like Al Myers revolutionized the grain monitor in the combine and forced the entire industry towards that. That's what happens when you combine an entrepreneur with a problem. So one of the really exciting things to me, and why I keep going back to the well, if you will. Sometimes it's not always full of water, I should let you know, but the reason I keep going back into this, and I continue to try to reinvest into the community with my time and in some cases my capital, is that the state of entrepreneurship in agriculture, I think today, is more promising than it's ever been. Now, for all the entrepreneurs in the back of the room sitting there saying, well, it really sucks right now, we can't raise capital, nobody wants to invest in ag technology. It's tough from a capital market standpoint, but in terms of the opportunity you have to make an impact in the market and to disrupt the status quo, it's never been greater. You probably can't see everything on this graph, so I'll explain it a little bit. But essentially, it starts over in the 1400s with the printing press. In the 1600s, it goes to the telescope. 1750, the introduction of the steam engine. What it's showing is the accelerating growth of new breakthrough technologies. So from 1950, when we put a man on the moon, to today, the revolutionary kind of groundbreaking technologies that have been introduced has never been greater. The evolution of artificial intelligence, processing speeds on computers and robotics, not to mention, the biologicals, chemicals, and healthcare revolutions that are happening. There's going to be more groundbreaking technology that's introduced in the next 10 years than I believe has ever been introduced in our life in the history of humanity. So it's a lot. And I would argue that every business in this room, every portfolio company that Ag Ventures Alliance has, is probably working on a problem that has just as much opportunity to impact the future of agriculture as the other folks that I listed out. Now, for that to happen, though, they need groups like yourself. They need investment. They need an ecosystem. They need each other to communicate with, help solve problems on how to grow companies. And one of the things that I'm really focused on now, kind of as a side project, is providing capital in that gap, right? So one of the things that we're really interested in doing through Ag Startup Engine, with the support of Ag Ventures Alliance and other investors, is putting together a larger fund, a fund that understands how to invest in Series A companies and lead those deals. So I'm not here to talk about that fund. I just share it with you because it's a problem that I've experienced, and I can't help myself but try and want to solve that. So if you have any interest or want to learn more about it, feel free to reach out to me or talk to me after. But at the end of the day, I think we're facing great challenges in the market of agriculture. I think there's a lot of challenges that are going to come in terms of food scarcity in the future. And I think it's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur in agriculture. So with that, do I have time for questions, or are we on a tight schedule?
We can take a few questions.
Okay. Spencer will cut us off if it gets too far. Yes. So we haven't raised any capital other than the private equity group that has invested in us to kind of pull the merger together. But we're looking at that potentially towards the end of this year. If needed, we might open it up to really my network of investors, which would include Ag Ventures Alliance for sure. Yes.
I'm not a member, but I'll chime in anyway. So coming out of COVID, we all of us entrepreneurs haven't seen each other and a lot of other people as well. And you mentioned there something that I wanted to pick up on, and it's really important for all of us and other entrepreneurs to connect with each other. I mean, what are you thinking about, and how are you guys trying to do that for the ecosystem up here?
I can speak from the perspective of the Ag Startup Engine, right, which is obviously works very closely with the Ag Ventures Alliance on a lot of stuff. But one of the things that we do is try to bring founders together in meaningful ways, meaningful interactions. So we do a monthly founder roundtable. We've also I guess my experience, so with Ag Startup Engine initially, I was a part of like the first company that they invested in. And so, through the course of Smart Ag, there was 4 or 5 of us, and we got really close, and we shared the same space a lot of times. And so we were able to help each other through a lot of challenges in terms of, the business stuff that sometimes you just need an answer for, right? HR, payroll, county, and all those types of things. And I know that we were more successful at Smart Ag because of those other founders that were in our ecosystem. And so from Ag Startup Engine standpoint, we pulled founders together. We also have like a cohort system that we're trying out, and hopefully kind of consolidating us back down, because we're like over 20 portfolio companies now. So it's a little bit harder to have the meaningful interaction. So we're kind of provided 4 different cohorts that people can participate in to continue to have that founder to founder interaction that's so important. Yeah, I've actually used the same speech before. You're calling me out now, but if you've heard this speech before, don't tell him. No, I first gave this talk to a class of Iowa State entrepreneurs that were early, students. But I thought it was relevant today, especially as you guys are continuing to invest in hard to solve problems, real problems, right? Not just technology, not just software, right? A lot of the portfolio companies of Ag Ventures Alliance are real physical products, and Silicon Valley investors can struggle with that a lot. And so it's vital that groups like Ag Ventures Alliance continue to do that and get these entrepreneurs on their path, in my opinion. Yes.
You foresee that high interest rates of savings accounts will choke venture capital?
I mean, I think there's a lot of fear right now from a venture capital standpoint. Obviously with some of the banking challenges, I don't know if you could point to, I mean, it's probably all interest rate driven, a lot of this. One of the most encouraging things to me though, especially being in ag, is that ag companies are very healthy, right? And frankly, a lot of the portfolio companies that are in Ag Ventures Alliance and Ag Startup Engine aren't great fits for traditional venture capital. And I think in many cases, they're probably better fits for strategic capital, right? Companies like Monsanto or Bayer or others that want to have some involvement in potential disruption that's going to occur in their market, right? The company that I mentioned earlier that was from Greece that got bought by Case IH, they were purchased for $110 million. And I mean, the technology they developed arguably is not super hard. It's not super complicated. The scope of it wasn't revolutionary. I think they raised, you know, maybe $10 to $20 million. So it's a really healthy return for their investors. But CNH had invested in them at an early stage, and it led to that successful exit for them. So it's not like you're always you know, I think the venture capital world a lot of times is targeting the Airbnbs and the Ubers and these unicorns, right? I don't think that's what we need to be focused on in ag. I think we need to be focused on investing in entrepreneurs who are solving a real problem and helping them get really strong hits on base, right? Strategic exits or to profitability. I think it was where do I think capital should be going that it's not right now? I think more capital needs to be going into venture, right? So putting it into funds that are targeted probably towards a later stage in the Midwest, right? So from my perspective, I'm kind of Midwest focused. In the Midwest, I think we need more funds that are targeted towards that Series A, Series B stage. We've got a lot of great seed groups. And this is one of the best. But we need more capital for companies that are trying to go raise an A round, put together a $5 to $10 million round.
We better take the last question. I see Matthew in the back.
I kind of lowered it because it's kind of my right comment at the end, but when you're saying lead to projects in the group, leading to like around 5 to 10 million, what kind of a size would that lead you to get?
Yeah, I mean, they should be targeting 20% of the round. They should be comfortable putting the term sheet together, and they should be comfortable investing in real equipment and hardware software problems, you know, hardware software companies, not just software. So that's my opinion in terms of what it needs to look like. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Spencer.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Colin. I can't wait to invite the rest of you up here in a few years after you've made the full circle seed stage investment to successful exit, turned investor, back investing in the next crop of startups. So awesome perspective. Thank you.